Okay, here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the wrestling with this is I guess reality. This is reality. This is life. This is what it is, what we know. My name is Chris Kloss. I'm gonna open the show today by first off welcoming our two other co-hosts with me in this journey we call reality, wrestling with reality. We got Eric Malikian out of Sin City. Yeah, Las Vegas, Nevada,
Hey,
right there. How you doing, Eric? Good morning to
good. How
you.
you doing?
Good. And then from there, we got none other than George Hermoza. Right
Dude, how you
there.
doing?
Good. How you doing? Good morning, sir. Of course, George Hermoza, the chairman and CEO of another channel, the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel, and George and I been down a road uh, ourselves with one another. A great journey that's been as well. But this is the Wrestling with Reality podcast. My name is Chris Kloss, and today we got a very special episode, impromptu. We're going to be talking about the scene in professional wrestling today, covering the entire gamut of what's been going on in the world of sports entertainment, professional wrestling, you name it. It is, we're heading into the fall season right now in the year September 2023. A lot going on in wrestling right now. Just coming off the heels of, wow, I mean, very impressive. All in, and they packed them all in there in Wembley Stadium. We hadn't seen anything like that since 1992. And of course, you know, I'm talking about SummerSlam 92, Wembley Stadium. Well, Wembley Stadium had a big event, but there was a big happening. We're going to start there in the back with one of the key names, one of the big names of professional wrestling. Let's talk a little bit right now, guys, about CM Punk. Big news with Mr. Khan and Mr. Punk, a big firing. You would think the big story would be all the happenings at Wembley Stadium, the crowd they brought in, but the wrestling world seems to be talking about this right now. Give me your thoughts on this extraordinary news right now here in the month of September with CM Punk.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, Punk was initially, or the word is he was fired from AEW, but there's also word he may have quit even before he went out to do his match at All In.
Well, I mean, and also, again, I don't want to be one of those people that is like, oh, this is what happened, and this is what, a lot of it's speculation. I believe Jeff Jarrett said it best, and he said, you know what, there's only really two people that know exactly what happened, and that's Tony Khan and CM Punk. But so, a lot of what we're gonna say, I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, I know everything, but also want to go with what a lot of the rumors was, because if anybody that's kind of heard the stories, keyword there is stories. There was a lot of kind of different recollections or happenings or storytelling when it came to that story. The whole story was not even it started before All In about Jungle Boy wanting to use real glass for a spot. That was weeks before the pay-per-view, and Punk was the kind of the one that said, like, no, we don't really do that here. You can do that on your precious little show Dynamite, but here on Rampage or Collision, we're not going to sit there and put you know lives at risk, or have people use real glass. Whether people want to say that's right or wrong, obviously they're entitled to their own opinion. But there was a spot. It was I think it was the last match, right? Or the match right before the Punk match, where Jungle Boy was going to do a spot on a car, and he kind of goes like, hey, look, it's real glass, so go cry me a river. So a lot of people watching that thought it was a direct shot at CM Punk. Whether it was or it wasn't, only Jungle Boy knows. So he goes to the back. CM Punk is getting ready for his match, and again, the story goes, is one of many stories, is CM Punk says to Jungle Boy, "Hey man, do you have a problem? Like, what's up? What's going on? Like what's your problem?" And there was fisticuffs apparently. CM Punk put Jungle Boy in a chokehold. Monitors were knocked over. And this is right before Punk versus Joe. Like literally, like Punk is up in the next match, and the match happens. Apparently, CM Punk is like saying like, "Screw this, I quit. I don't want to work here, whatever, whatever." Anyway, so the upcoming pay per view and the Dynamite and the Rampage and the Collision, it's all in Chicago. And if anybody knows that market in Chicago, is CM Punk is a big, big reason why the tickets get sold in Chicago. But he wasn't on Dynamite. He wasn't an All Out anymore because he got fired the day before the All Out pay per view. So all that stuff happened. Again, it's all hearsay. But at the end of the day, it's CM Punk is no longer with AEW.
This has kind of been brewing for a while here. CM Punk's been with AEW for a couple years. But, from the moment he's come in the company, it seems like there's been issues, at least for the last year or so. I mean, this was obviously the straw that broke the camel's back, but this is dating well back, at least a year prior. And it's obvious to me that, whatever the deal is, Tony Khan does not have a handle on his locker room, and guys do. We could sugarcoat it and go many different ways with this, but guys do go into business for themselves on social media, taking jabs at each other. And I think ultimately CM Punk just had enough of everything.
I mean, it just kind of depends, right? Like, it just kind of depends on, like, obviously again, we can go on and on about this because it goes beyond pro wrestling, and Colossus knows exactly what I'm talking about. Like, there are so many people that are just so quick to take sides. Oh, either you're CM Punk or your team, Elite, Bucks, Kenny Omega, right? Like, oh, I'm CM Punk, so screw the Elite. Oh, I'm Team Elite, so screw CM Punk. Like, there are many situations in where both sides are completely right and both sides are completely wrong. Like, there are, it doesn't always have to be one versus the other. In this case scenario, I think there's a big combination of, like, there's a lot of things that CM Punk was right about, and there's a lot of things that he was wrong about. There's a lot of things that he was, Elite were right about, and there's a lot of things that Elite were wrong about. And again, a lot more of the story is CM Punk apparently was supposed to have a meeting with the Elite, and it got canceled at the last minute. So, again, that's maybe more to the story. Maybe why Punk was frustrated, but again, there's so much more that I'm sure we even don't know of what we've heard so far on the web.
Yeah, it's very true. But it does show that I think there's a lot of internal problems in AEW. And, say what you will, whether you love, dislike, or indifferent about WWE, this would probably never happen over there. Actually, I'd say it probably would never happen over there. It wouldn't happen over there.
I mean, also just kind of depends too, because I think a lot of people are really quick to say like, "Oh, it would never happen in WWE," but yet a lot of people are very quick to say like, "Oh, well, what about Brett and Shawn and Booker T and Batista and like all these other backstage fights that we've seen?" But as it is with many situations, is they're all different scenarios. Like, it's all different. Like, each individual, I guess, brawl backstage, even though Batista and Booker wasn't at backstage, they were all in it. Like, they were all like they were all different from each other. Is what I'm trying to say.
It is. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. It's interesting. I see your point, Malikian, about WWE having a tighter grip on these situations and not really. I don't know if you want to call Khan maybe fanboying out for these guys a little bit, where let's say Vince was beyond doing that, and let's say after the mid '80s, like let's say but ironically, I will say this: there was going back to Wembley Stadium, going back to SummerSlam '92, same exact place, same magnitude of a show. We had a locker room situation with one of the key guys in the company who was gone after that show, and that was Road Warrior Hawk.
But he didn't get into a fight with anybody. He was just drugged out.
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't the exact same thing, but it was like a
Yeah,
fight with
still an issue.
things and management, and he was gone after that show. So I just thought of that for a second.
I mean,
It was a similar situation.
yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is there are people that say like, oh, should Punk have been fired? Should he have not been fired? At the end of the day, he got fired. But listen, should he have been? I'm Team Punk. I'm not saying I'm anti-elite, but I do think he does offer a lot to the business. But should he have been fired? 1,000% yes. Whether it's his fault, whether it's not his fault at all, you look for all the issues that the company has had, and there's one constant when it came to controversy, and that's CM Punk. And obviously, people are going to be like, "Oh, well, bad news is or bad press is good. It's good press," which is the biggest bunch of BS I've ever heard in my entire life. But like you have the Punk, and he has his issues, and people he had to make people had to create own shows for him. Like sometimes maybe it's not worth the trouble. Like I know that they've probably lost a lot of money already by not having Punk on certain shows, but again, sometimes you got to cut not necessarily your monetary losses, but maybe your backstage losses. And again, maybe AEW might not be a good fit for him. Maybe WWE is the perfect fit for him. Who knows? Like maybe there's a reason why WWE is where they are now. Yeah, maybe there is some backstage tussles every now and then, but they're also really successful. Like really, whether people are fans of it or not, they're really really successful. And they don't really have to worry about these kind of PR issues. So again, at the end of the day, maybe just Punk and AEW wasn't a match. People like to think that they were because Punk comes back in his promo says like, "Oh, in 2005 I left pro wrestling, and in 2021 I'm back in pro wrestling." Like maybe he's not really meant for that pro wrestling backstage environment.
You could be right, very right. But the fact remains, though, too, that at the end of the day, this is a business and it's
Hmm.
about drawing money. And Punk was obviously by far head and shoulders the biggest draw for that company. If you look at the quarter hours and breaking everything down, CM Punk is head and shoulders, you know, brought in the biggest ratings. He drew the biggest houses for the company whenever he appeared on Dynamite, on, any of the shows, Collision, or any of the pay-per-views. And now they're pretty much in limbo. How do you move on from this?
So
Is going to be
where's the fine line then? Like it's easy to say, oh, Punk is the biggest draw. So where do you draw the line of, all right, he's our biggest draw, but like we can't just have him. He's always at the central figure of everything that's going on. Like so, where do you draw the line of, dude, you're a big draw, but also like, man, we got a big problem on our hands.
Well, I think it comes down to one of those things too, and this is the problem where Tony Khan is the head of the company. If he's not going to directly take charge, he needs to have certain cooks in the kitchen alongside him guiding the company. They need to set guidelines, they need to set a certain professionalism. And this just doesn't go for people outside of Punk because he's the biggest draw for the company. This is just, hey, these are the set of rules we have. This is what people need to follow. And everyone needs to get on the same page instead of letting everybody just do what they want randomly on a show and randomly let them go on social media and say whatever they want, take little jabs at people. You're in the big leagues now. And, as we all have experience in this business at different levels, the end of the day, professionalism is the key to being successful in this business. It doesn't matter, oh, you want to pop the boys backstage with, these quote unquote great matches. At the end of the day, the professional wrestling business is about, you know, pleasing the fans and drawing money.
But I'm asking, like, where do you draw the line? At what point, no matter how big of it, whether it's Punk or someone else, whether somebody, how big of a draw he is, at what point do you draw the line of saying, man, he's our biggest draw, but I think we got to let him go?
Well, this goes deeper than that. I'm not saying 100% Punk isn't in the wrong, but there's a bigger issue underlying with this. Because if you listen to anything Punk has ever done, he's there strictly to draw money. He's there to do business. And it sounds like other people might potentially have other agendas in mind and just want to go off rogue doing their own thing. So my point is basically Tony Khan needs to take charge of everything, and he needs to have, direction within the company where he's going with everything, and he needs to have people helping him guide the company instead of just letting people randomly do things.
No, and
That's
but
where
and
the
you're
stem
right,
of the
and
problem is.
but it sounds like the step one in the process was firing Punk, because when that happened, a lot of people on internet before he went on TV and was like, "Oh, my life was in danger." That 3-4 hour span of Punk getting fired and Khan embarrassing himself with that little speech he did, a lot of people were saying like, "Man, Tony finally grew a backbone. He finally grew some balls and actually did something about." So that sounds like it's in the step in the right direction. But now, like I said, there's got to be a line of like, you're the top draw, but you can't just, because like I said, whether it's Ryan Nemeth, who was the other guy that had issues with uh maybe Chris Daniels, I think it was. There's all these things. And again, and I agree with you in terms of like, I think Punk was just doing it what he thinks that was best for business. It sounded like he had a bigger picture in mind, and a lot of people that didn't mesh with a lot of people's agendas and whatnot. So again, maybe he wanted to get fired. Maybe it was easy here for him to try to himself get fired because he knows there's greener pastures. I mean, is it a coincidence that Punk was backstage at a WWE show like 3 months ago?
Yeah,
I don't.
that's
I don't
interesting.
know. I don't know. There can be more to the story.
I mean, it could be one of those things too, where Punk is potentially at his life now, maybe where he doesn't need the money, and who knows? We may see him again. We may not. That brings the bigger speculation and creates even bigger ideas now. Over, we'll see what happens in the next few months. Is he going to end up in WWE? I don't know if people know this, but coming up, I believe Survivor Series is going to be in Chicago this year.
Hmm.
It's amazing how then the wheels get turning about, well, speaking of CM Punk being in a WWE locker room 3 months ago. Now looking back, you brought up the Montreal screw job, George, and past dramas that's happened. Like, and then the rumor mill is going to get started now. And as you said, Eric, it is very interesting that he was back there. Looking back at the Montreal screw job now, in retrospect, people are debating now whether that was reality. Were we wrestling with reality at that point in terms of like, okay, we saw this, there was a documentary, I know this was real because I watched the product and the product's one thing, but this other Wrestling with Shadows, this told me the real story. So we were so caught up with that being the real story that we, as a lot of people believe now, not everybody, but a lot of people believe now, oh, maybe this whole thing was a work.
It wasn't a
So
work.
no, did I say it was?
You're implying it was.
Did I say it was? I'm saying that people now, and as opposed to when it came out, the circles, that a lot of people are saying that it was now. Nobody was saying that it was back in
I
the day.
think.
I'm
I
just
think.
wait,
I
wait,
think
wait, wait,
more
wait, wait.
people
Let me
were saying
finish.
it was a work back then.
Let me finish. Let me finish. First off, I'm not saying it was a work. I'm just talking about the public at large and
Hmm.
their perception about
Yes.
this thing as opposed to back in the day. That's all I'm saying. And we
Hmm.
know, being in this business, being in the inner circle, being in the back, talking to the boys, talking to everybody, there's a big consensus of people that think that now, is all I'm saying. Okay? So we're just talking about what people think in wrestling. I'm not saying my opinion. I'm not saying I do or don't believe in this at all. But what I'm saying is, we look back on things like this and people have different opinions now. And it's true. People do have different opinions from when it first happened. So um, everything has changed now to where we're not as innocent as we were when Wrestling with Shadows came out, right? So
Yeah.
people are going to have these thoughts. People are going to have these thoughts. So all I'm saying is that is a very interesting WWE. I'm just people are
going to start putting their thinking caps on right now and going a whole bunch of different directions with that scenario of him being backstage a few months ago. I'm not saying anything that I believe it's a work or whatever like that. But and again, going back to the Hawk thing, for example, Wembley Stadium, and Eric, you said that stuff like this wouldn't happen in WWE, and I believe they have a tighter grip on things. But imagine for a moment if the internet was the way it was back at SummerSlam. Everybody would be talking about that Hawk situation, maybe the way we're talking about CM Punk right now.
Well, it's interesting. If we're going to go back in time, also at Wembley Stadium, there was another controversy at that show, with Bulldog kind of leading up to the show being maybe not in the best condition as well.
There's no maybe. There's no
Well,
maybe.
Here's the thing, though. At the end of the day, what that event proved is that the company was ran a certain way. The guys were professional. They made it through the show. People are still talking about that show to this day. And unfortunately, hey, bravo to All In. They drew a great house. There's speculation on what the true attendance is and, whether there's comps involved in that or not. But either way, they drew a big house and all that. But are people going to be talking about the show 30 years from now? Like they're talking about SummerSlam 92.
I guess we got to do another podcast in 30 years and see if that's true or not.
I can't hear.
But
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. But going back to
Can
what
you
Klaus
hear
was
me?
saying, yes.
Yes.
You can? Okay, I can't hear anything.
Well, how did you know we just said yes? Going back to what Klaus said, I think there are more people that thought the screw job was a work back then than they are now because the internet wasn't so privy back then. So I feel like because a lot of people did know that Brett was leaving to WCW, but I think when people saw that, it was a lot more of, oh, I guess that's how they're going to write him off. I think more people thought it was a work back then than they did now. Because Klaus said there's a big consensus that thinks it's a work now. That means a lot of people think it's a work. Like a lot more people think it's a work than they thought it was a shoot. And I completely disagree. I think people know. I think when you have, don't get me wrong, all the respect in the world, when you have wrestling geniuses like Scott Hall go on Dark Side of the Ring and say, I think it was a work. Yes, there are going to be a lot of people that probably agree with Scott Hall because he's Scott Hall. But that doesn't mean a wrestling genius like a Scott Hall can't be wrong every now and then. I think it's still. I think I apologize if I offend anybody, but I think it is a little bit silly to ever think that that was a work, especially when Brett was gone from the WWE for so long. If it was a work, Brett would have been back in the WWE within minutes of him not being in WCW anymore. He got released in 2000, and if that was the case, he would have been back at 2002 WrestleMania 18 in Toronto to face Vince McMahon, which was originally pitched before it actually happened 8 years later.
Well, I think to go back to what Chris was saying about people debating if it's being a work, I kind of disagree. I'm not saying that your opinion's wrong, George, or anything, but people do go back and forth. I've talked to other people, and there are a lot of people that think to some degree maybe it was a work, with the camera crews, the Wrestling with Shadows documentary, and just, it's interesting because people still to this day debate it. And there is a kind of a 50-50 split. A lot of people I know that watched wrestling back in the day that don't watch it anymore still talk about it to this day and will still, go back and forth with whether it was a shoot or it was a work. People are still talking about it to this day.
I think there's always going to be like a good discussion regards around it, and obviously it's something that I think I don't want to insult anybody here. I think it's a lot of the wannabe smart marks that think they try to sound too smart. Did you know it was a work? Like, no, I get it. Like you want to kind of stir the pot and give like a hot take, but like there's too many elements to for it to be a work. Like, oh yeah, they were recording it. Yeah, they were filming a Bret Hart documentary that started about a year prior. You're going to tell me that they had planned this out for a year for the screw job, and they planned out for him to go to WCW? I mean, Bret Hart was like the biggest star in Canada. Why wouldn't you want to do a documentary on Bret Hart? And it just so happened to be that, obviously it ended with the way it did, but like, yeah, like they're not going to cater a WWE storyline for these random independent documentarians. Like, no, like that's not what Vince is going to do. Vince is going to do whatever he wants to do because it's his company. And the same way that, we all have our own thing, we all spend our own money on our own, whatever it is that we want to do. Nobody else is going to tell us how to run our own business and how to spend our own money. So I don't see how all of a sudden, because these documentarians that nobody's ever heard of, all of a sudden Vince is going to cater to them. Like, no, like that's not going to happen.
No, and again, I'm not saying, you're wrong, but at the same time, people are still debating it back and forth
Well,
to
I'm
this day.
telling
And I
those
think,
people,
yeah.
that are debating, that's who I'm telling. I'm trying to convince them, or I'm trying to tell them to stop being such a smart mark and actually look at reality at what it is, and just start trying to be so smart and be like, oh, well, of course the screw job was the work. Oh, of course so and so was intentional. Of course, like, no, man, like don't be so like so caught up in your own like trying to be so smart, and just look at what the reality is. Like, not everything is a work, not everything is going to be some kind of conspiracy theory against whatever it is, that whatever narrative that you want to tell. So my message is to those people that are listening to this.
But you know what, George? Isn't it kind of cool, though, that a lot of people that maybe don't even watch wrestling anymore, the fact that still to this day people are talking about it and debating it, isn't that the mystique of wrestling, what made wrestling
Yeah,
great? Where
I, I,
people,
I will I will always say, and it's so crazy how a lot of these and again, I'm on the side of it being a complete shoot, but it's so crazy how there are so many things that was never even supposed to happen, kind of like this screw job. It created like the amount of money that has been made off the Montreal screw job, by all accounts, is like insane to me. The amount of money that has been made by the screw job for something that wasn't even supposed to happen is like astronomical to me. And that to me is probably one of the best things about pro wrestling, is that so many things that aren't supposed to happen. Like, oh wait, like what? Like, you look at like Kofi Kingston, like he wasn't in the plans to win the WWE championship. It's because somebody got hurt. And because of something like that, now it trickles. And then we saw one of the greatest moments in obviously WrestleMania history. And just, yeah, so many things that never was supposed to happen, but yet somehow they're able to make millions and millions of dollars from, which is unbelievable.
you're talking about Kofi Kingston winning the title.
Yeah. Like, because that wasn't even the plan by like the Rumble. That was like, that happened like a month and a half before. It was like, oh, I think we're on to something here, and it ended up being obviously one of the coolest moments in all of WWE.
You think of WWE history, that was one of the coolest moments?
Wait, one more time, sorry.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I didn't like
No, I'm saying, you think the whole Kofi Kingston winning the title was one of the coolest moments in WWE
1000%.
history?
Yes.
You know what? Honestly, I don't even remember it until you brought it up. I mean, I knew he won the title, but I just don't remember it along, the lines of one of the
Yeah.
biggest things ever.
Well, I mean, it was. I was gonna say. I mean, obviously, like I said, it was an accident, but like just some of the buildup. It was just like some of the lead ups, the Smackdowns, and yeah, like I again, you don't remember, but still, like there are a lot of people. Like I remember being backstage at or I was on a WPW show that I was wrestling on, maybe like in July of that year of 2019, and like Kofi Kingston just comes out, or no, it doesn't come out, but like he shows up backstage, and man, like the locker room was like marking out for him. I mean, there were like people in the locker room just kind of be like, man, like that story is like inspirational, man. Like, like you gave me a reason to believe not only in you, but in myself as well. Like, just people were just like, oh man, it was a really, I don't really mark out too often, which is, that's a lie. I mark out all the time, but I just try to obviously keep it in. But like, that was one where I was like, I'm gonna take a picture with the WWE champ right now. And yeah, it was, yeah, unforgettable experience.
So on to other news. The Rock appeared on SmackDown this week. People have been kind of wondering, is he ever going to come back to WWE, make an appearance? And it finally happened.
It's been 4 years. I don't think people realize it's been that long. It's been 4 years.
I thought it was even longer than that.
It's been since, I want to say, the first SmackDown on Fox, which was like what, October 2019.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That was 4 years ago.
Yeah. So that was, I think, I want to say that was the last time he showed up on. And to be fair, like there was like a year and a half. That doesn't really count because like The Rock is not going to show up in the Thunderdome.
Yeah.
um,
I
yeah.
mean, theoretically, he could have because of everything that was going down at the time, and he probably had a lot of time on his hands,
Yeah.
like we all did.
Yeah, but I mean, like, yeah, somebody like The Rock, somebody like Brock Lesnar, they're not gonna show up at the Thunderdome. Like they could have, but they're not gonna, and they didn't. They never did. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people thought he'd maybe show up at WrestleMania 20, or I'm sorry, 37, which was the one that they were back at in Tampa. I mean, obviously he didn't show up, but yeah, I mean, it's been a while. It's been he's been missed by the reaction of the fans in Colorado last night.
Well, he's on. Hopefully, everyone's Mount Rushmore is the biggest names in pro wrestling history. I mean, he's obviously one of the biggest attractions, and I think we all feel it's long overdue.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there are a lot of news has been happening because he was on an interview with Pat McAfee yesterday, and he dropped a lot of gems that kind of had people rolling on their little Twitter accounts, little fingers, and that's he said that him versus Roman Reigns was pretty much a lock for this past Mania 39, and some unforeseen happenstances happened, and it didn't happen. Obviously, we saw Cody versus Roman, but he said he's still open for the match, and that kind of gave some discussion. Is when are we going to see Roman versus Rock? Are we going to see that at the next Mania? Because if that's the case, it might be a little bit longer before Cody Rhodes is able to finish that story. So that a lot of like and it's only been like 24 hours too, so there's like a lot of talk been happening, not amongst the WWE, but a lot of the chatter that I've been seeing as far as like, man, poor Cody, like Cody just can't catch a break. Cody, he's going to go back to AEW because now they're, whenever The Rock shows up, everything else is secondary all of a sudden. But again, that goes to show, like, is The Rock that much, is he that much of a star, or are there lack of stars in the WWE? And obviously that's debatable. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, the Mania is going to be 2 nights. A lot of people are saying maybe Rock versus Roman on night 1, Cody versus Roman night 2. Who knows? Obviously, we're not going to see what happens until it happens. But yeah, a lot of chit chatter back and forth.
I mean, if they kicked off an angle last night, slowly kicked something off, it was great. I will hand it off to a product that I think that's been stale for so long, that I think, and something you forgot to mention, The Rock mentioned on the Pat McAfee podcast, he mentioned that it was almost a lock for him and Roman last year, but they couldn't agree on something at the tail end of it, so it did not happen.
Yeah.
So if this is the kickoff to something great, kudos to WWE. I think this is perfect. And obviously, again, this might be just my opinion, maybe not, but it's no shade on Cody or anyone else. But I mean, there's very few people that have the star power The Rock does. So everything is pretty much secondary, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's only been like 4 or 5 actual legit box office superstar guys ever in the WWE. And yeah, Cody can be one of them, but obviously it's there's still a lot of time to go. Forever's a long time. But yeah, we did see a little bit on SmackDown where he kind of had like Solo kind of do some stuff, and Paul Heyman's like, wait, that wasn't orders from Roman, from the tribal chief. So kind of show like, wait, who is Solo taking orders from? There happens to be another guy backstage that's a high on the hierarchy of the Samoan dynasty. So I don't know. Yeah, I do think there were tiny seeds that were planted regarding that. But yeah, whether we see what ends up happening with the actual main event, is Punk going to come back? If Punk's going to come back, then he's not going to come back for a mid card spot in the WWE. So yeah, good, more good, because I've never seen people. I've never seen bad product as far as like too many good things in the kitchen. Maybe like time wise, you can only have so much, but I think good things on the horizon for whatever's happening on the land of the WWE.
Absolutely. I think this might be, at least in my opinion, maybe one of the most instrumental times in maybe the last 20 plus years within the company. You've got The Rock, who just came back. CM Punk, is he going to end up in WWE again? Is he not? There's just a lot going on right now, and it is an interesting time for sure. And only WWE could benefit from
And
this.
of course, LA Knight just getting like, I mean, the reaction that he's getting, the pop that he's getting is like on an all-time high, and it just keeps getting higher and higher every single week. And good for that guy, because we all have experience on our own working with this with Sean Ricker, LA Knight, and just like the work that he's been doing for the last decade and a half. Kudos to him to finally getting a shot to show the whole world what he's capable of.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also in big wrestling news this past week, the merger of WWE with, you know, and being sold to TKO and the merger of that with UFC, interesting times ahead on that end as well. I know there are a lot of massive layoffs in the last 24 hours within the company, 100 plus employees, they're saying so far, if reports are correct.
Yeah, I mean it's to say it was surprising would be silly, because with any merger, you're always going to have massive layoffs. Um, I think there is a lot of hoopla over nothing, because the thing about pro wrestling fans, to be specifically pro wrestling fans, and I'm sure that happens in all of and a lot of other fan bases as well, just to be fair, is that a lot of people get worked up for nothing, because and again, God bless anybody that loses their job. I'm not. This isn't a knock on them. This isn't a knock on anybody in general. But there are a lot of fans that get worked up for people losing their jobs, that you don't know what they actually do for the job. Like, you don't know what they actually like. Are they just like were they what's the word I'm looking for? When family, you get hired because of family. Um,
Well,
Nepotism.
that
You
happens.
don't know if you're like a nepotism hire. You don't know if you're friends with somebody. Maybe there are a lot of the guys that probably uh have useless jobs now that the merger is kind of, now that you have other eyes going through the books and saying like, oh wow, like why do we have a podcasting department when there really isn't a podcast that we put out? Like, why do we have so many guys? So again, I mean, a lot of it just like it's unsurprising. Like, there's no surprise whenever these guys lose their jobs. But I think if anything, the big thing is going to be like, are going to be, or is on-air talent going to lose their jobs? And obviously, it's always unfortunate, no matter whether you're on air or off air, that lose their job. But obviously, more fans get affected by certain on-air talent, losing their jobs. Obviously, 2 years ago, Bray Wyatt got released, and that was like a shock to everybody. Bray Wyatt, Braun Strowman, Lana, Nia Jax, like, all these people are obviously have jobs now, and obviously Bray, God rest his soul, but that was more shocking to the fan base and like an executive that you don't even know what they do, lose their job.
Well, it's like you said, with any business, when there's a merger, business decisions have to be made. And I'm not, making light of people losing their jobs. It's never, a pleasant thing. And, in all fairness, too, there's a lot of people within any company that make things happen behind the
Mm-hmm.
scenes.
Yeah.
So, in all honesty, to say that there's nepotism hires, I'm sure there are, but then again, the same could be said about a lot of
Anything. Yeah.
on-air talent, a lot of pro wrestlers that have jobs because of strictly who they're related to.
Yeah, I mean that's everything though. That's every business I've ever worked for. I work on I'm a freelance. I work on like commercials, and almost every single shoot that I work on, there's always almost one person that's like, friends with a director or friends with a friend of a director or the daughter of a director or producer, whatever. I mean, it's not exclusive to pro wrestling. Um,
Absolutely not.
so it's everywhere. But yeah, like I said, I mean, it's one of those instances of like, obviously UFC and WWE, they merged and now they're under a TKO umbrella. So now you're looking like, oh, WWE has a travel department, UFC has a travel department. Like, why do we need two travel departments? Like, like it just, yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's just the way it is. I mean, if anything, the bigger shock to me and is like the WWE is no longer a family business. Whether people say what they want about Vince McMahon, but like that was a family owned business for the longest time. And
Absolutely.
this is now like the 5 days officially where it's not a family owned business anymore. Like it's literally been one for like over 50, 60 years. And now it's a more of a corporate world now. Under somebody else's umbrella now, which is, I mean, whether you can say it's unfortunate or not, it is what it is. Maybe as a wrestling fan, we won't even notice, but you know, it remains to be seen.
You could be very much right, George. And at the end of the day, I still think it's been said by people, at the top of the food chain in the TKO group that Vince McMahon is still ultimately going to be the boss at the end of the day on the WWE side of things.
Yeah. I mean, to what extent? Because I've always been curious myself, like when Vince McMahon, quote unquote, retired the first time, because everybody's always been saying, it doesn't matter who you are, what department you're in, Vince McMahon oversaw everything, and that was what I always heard. Whether it's the creative, whether it's the media, whether it's the books, whether it's the corporate stuff, he oversaw everything. And
Yes.
I was always curious how that worked when he was gone for, a little bit. And I know he's not there all the time now, but is he like who's overseeing, who's approving the t-shirt designs, who's approving the posters and the hats and well, all that stuff, Like I know it seems like it's maybe more like roles are given now. Obviously Triple H is head of creative, the same way that maybe like Vince Russo was head of creative, but still had that maybe. I mean, obviously, Vince McMahon isn't as hands-on as he is. To what extent? That's all speculation. I don't know. Like I'm not gonna sit here and say that like Vince McMahon still has his handprints on everything. Maybe on some stuff, maybe on none of the stuff. Maybe he picks and choose. Maybe Triple H. Uh, Again, I can't speak for him, and I don't know. I'm guessing. Maybe Triple H is just as frustrated as Vince being in charge of still officially. So maybe he kind of gives Vince McMahon a couple like if Vince has an idea, all right, we'll use it because if he keeps saying no to Vince, he doesn't want Vince to be like, oh well, I'm just gonna oversee everything again because I can. So I don't know. I mean, whatever. But like, I mean, at the end of the day, they are doing record business on a regular basis, and who are we to say that whatever they're doing is wrong? Because you know they're still selling out arenas. So what the hell do I know?
You're absolutely correct. And at the end of the day, getting back onto the subject of the merger, it's a business. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the bottom line,
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah.
I mean, wrestling fans could speculate and say certain things, but unless you're in the thick of things and know what's fully going on, behind the scenes, in the office, it's just people talking.
Yeah. I mean, how many reports have we seen to be proven wrong? Like it's just so many. Like, and even if we hear a report that somebody reports, or a story that somebody reports that's 100% factual, we don't even know to what percent. Like, I mean, it's fact, but we don't know how big that is in the bigger scheme of things, right? We can see like, oh, so and so happens. All right, cool, that's right. But like that can be just a small component of the bigger picture of whatever this new venture is, or even before and after the merger, where like, okay, you know, like we see something, but like there's probably a bigger picture in whatever it is that we read about.
Absolutely. And the bigger thing to come out of this merger is going to be, what happens in the next 12 months with the TV rights fees coming up. Is
Yeah.
Fox going to renew them? Are they not? Are they going to end up on, pure streaming? Like,
Yeah.
that's going to be the biggest thing to come out of this over the next 12 months, I have a
That's
feeling.
that's going to be a game changer as well. because with the exception of obviously the pay-per-views or PLEs, whatever they call them, is like there's never really been a a weekly TV show in pro wrestling that is streaming. Like, and I don't think that's ever been the case, and or live at least. And I think I'm sure there's been some here and there, but like live, like where it's live every single, and you got to log on to like a to like an Amazon or a Disney Plus just to stream it live. Like, I don't know, like that's it's going to be a game changer. The same way that when WWE Network first launched, that was a bit of a game changer. If nobody realizes how much it was, because yeah, like who watches like whenever people watch like football, like it's usually on one of the stations, or they have the NFL package. And I know this year it's like the NFL package is on YouTube TV, which again, that's a game changer in itself. And I don't know if how much money that's going to bring in. I didn't subscribe, and I'm a big football fan, so again, it goes to show like how many people are going to subscribe to an Amazon Prime because SmackDown is there. I can't say I can or I won't because I already have Amazon Prime, so I'm not gonna they're not getting extra money from me because WWE might go on there because they're already getting my money to begin with. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I definitely signed up for Peacock when WWE Network went to there. So that you know, and who knows? Maybe that might change soon too. Who knows? I don't know.
Absolutely. You bring up another good point. I mean, if they end up on another platform that's already well established, I mean, will it really affect the numbers for that streaming service?
I mean, I do think it worked out for Peacock because, like I said, I didn't even know Peacock was a thing until the WWE Network joined them. And again, I've been subscribing to Peacock since day one of the WWE joining them. So we'll see if that's going to be the same for other streaming devices.
I agree. Now on to, we were talking about, potential nepotism a few moments ago. Other big news that's creating a stir, Nia Jax back in WWE.
I don't see a problem with it.
At some point, and it's nothing against the individual, that people are talking about, but sometimes people have what they call in pro wrestling is go away.
Yeah.
And at some point, it becomes one of those things where you want heat. Heat is great. But if it's go away heat, then that's the complete opposite of what you want.
Mm-hmm. I think it is unfortunate that there are many people on I hate saying that all the time, the internet, because as if their opinion matters, that uh they want wrestling at its core, right? The good guys, the bad guys. Oh, back in my day, people didn't break kayfabe on the internet. Oh, back in my day, people weren't, we weren't seeing some of these heels, kissing babies and hugging kids and whatever. But God forbid there's somebody out there that gets real heat. Oh no, I don't want them back. Oh, they're gonna be a cancer to the locker room. And Nia Jax brings that real heat that is somewhat lacking these days. And now like people can't just pick and choose what they want. You have a Nia Jax, you have a CM Punk. You have people that can bring the heat, but then like, oh well, no, not that kind of heat. We want to like our heels. We want our heels to be cool. We want our heels to still be doing cool moves. We don't want our heels to be using psychology. We want them to give us the finger and call us nerds. And yeah, we're nerds. Like, dude, like what the hell happened to that argument that people had of like wanting real heat and wanting real heel heat? Nia Jax brings all those things. And all of a sudden, you're like, she's clearly there because they want to have a good relationship with The Rock. Oh, dude, kiss my ass, dude. Like, people like to just kind of sit there and whine and complain on Twitter and Facebook or whatever it is they want to do. And it's like, no, man, she's been, and if anything, oh, this is the worst part. This is the absolute worst part about just people on Twitter and people in general, right? They'll go, "Oh, I turned off the TV. This is why I didn't watch Raw because Nia Jax showed up. I turned off the TV as soon as Nia Jax showed up. Oh man, I didn't miss anything on Raw because Nia Jax showed up. She showed up in the last 2 minutes of the freaking show. Tell me that's not everything wrong with people complaining about pro wrestling on Twitter."
You're right. And at the end of the day, I guess we'll see what happens. It'll come down to whenever she's on TV, if ratings for that quarter hour go down when she's on, if there's a pattern, then it might prove to the theory of go away heat. I agree, true heat, where you want to see somebody get obliterated and see the baby face overcome the heel, that's awesome. And that's what you want. But if it's going to be go away heat where people turn off, then it just doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean that's always hard to determine as well, because obviously their numbers can lie, obviously, and I always go back to 1997. Is anybody like really familiar with the wrestling landscape in 1997
That
as
was a
far as
very
storylines go?
interesting. That was a very interesting time
But what
in
was
pro
going on
wrestling.
in summer of '97 in WCW? Do you guys remember? I mean, I'm not
Yeah,
like quizzing you
the
guys.
biggest. It was just the NWO angle was red
Okay,
hot.
so
They
and what was
started
going?
the Sting and Hogan.
Yeah, yeah.
That was the gravy
And then
train.
and then what was going on in WWF in the summer of '97? Do you guys remember?
They had a big thing going on at that time. Are you talking about that Stampede pay-per-view they had? The In Your
Yeah,
House?
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Between
yeah,
yeah.
because I just didn't want to be like talking and talking and talking without people knowing. So I'm glad that you bring that up. In the summer of '97, WWF was by far the absolute better wrestling show than Nitro. Nitro was still doing fantastic, or still the content itself was being fantastic. But man, that summer of like the Hearts and Austin and the Stampede and like USA versus Canada, but Canada, Brett's a face everywhere else, but in the US he's a heel. Like there's so many cool things. Undertaker was champ. Like Austin was just kind of on the rise every single week. My point is, WWF Monday Night Raw was by far the better show on a weekly basis, like by far. But guess who won all the ratings? It wasn't WWF
WCW.
Raw. It was Nitro, and they were beating them by a lot. So my point of that is all the numbers can lie. Just because something, the ratings might be low for something doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad show. That's all I'm trying to say. That the numbers can lie. And I always point to '97 as far as that goes. With that said, yeah, I mean, it's hard to determine somebody now who's go away heat. I mean, we don't know a lot of numbers besides ratings, right? What if she sells? What if she sells $1 million worth of T-shirt sales, but maybe gets a low TV rating? Is she a draw? I don't know. That's not that's not my metric to decide. What if she has high ratings but doesn't sell T-shirts? Again, there's so many differences that can happen that can determine whether somebody's a draw. Again, my point is, she's not out there trying to make friends, and I think that's why people take offense to it. Obviously, pro wrestling these days, and obviously maybe this is a big problem of what people have, is pro wrestling these days seem to be a lot more friendlier, as far as like there's a lot more conventions and there's a lot more meet and greets. There's a lot more like, the WrestleCons and the Starcasts of where you can meet some of your favorite wrestlers, and you see some of like the bigger heels these days, and when you meet them, they couldn't be a nicer person. And that was always reserved for the back. That was always reserved for the locker room. And I'm sure both of you guys, Eric and Klaus, can attest to how many guys have we met personally, not in a fan environment, but whether it's backstage or wherever, um, a, couldn't be a bigger heel in the business, but we meet them, couldn't be a nicer guy. I'm talking like, oh my god, like this is like I remember Christian Cole. I know. I mean, I'm sure you guys know Christian Cole. Obviously, like he never was never in WWE except for that extra work. But I met him for the first time a while ago, and I told him, "Yo, like I thought you were such a jerk off because of your character. You're coming out there all cocky, all vaping to the ring. You came across as such a douchebag." You know what he said? He said, "Dude, that is the greatest compliment that you can give me because that's exactly what I was trying to go to. But I could not have met a nicer human being." And obviously, there's more. There's bigger wrestlers that attest to that. But I think now we're seeing some of these heels that are a true nice guy at heart being more in a public setting. The signings, the Twitter, the Facebook, and you're like, man, like that. I'm not going to go on and on because that can be a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
Some can argue maybe that's what's killing the business, but who am I to say killing the business? Because record numbers are at an all-time high. But again, like I feel like that's what Nia Jax. That's why people hate on her because she's not that likable person outside of the ring. Like if she was out there, on Twitter every week and like Steph Delander, Steph Delander is right.
No.
She's like
I don't even know who Christian Cole is, but go ahead.
You know who Christian Cole is.
No, I don't.
Yeah, we've had conversations about it. But like, what am I say? Stuff like she's like with Zack Ryder now. Like she does the indie scene with like Zack Ryder now, but she's out there doing the loops and answering Twitter messages and being engaging. That's what it is. Like people aren't. If people don't engage and you're a heel, but we don't like you, like for reals, we don't like you. And I think that's like is that wrestling or is that the fan base that's this problem? So again,
well, I think on that whether you're right, there's other degrees of measure, TV ratings, merchandise, maybe a couple other different streams of bringing in revenue. I guess time will only tell, but you know what? We may never know either way.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think a lot of these conventions, while they're great in theory, I think has killed the business a lot. I mean, like you said, going back to meeting, some wrestlers as a kid, I'm not gonna bring up names, but I met a few guys that were heels. A couple of them are no longer alive. A couple of them still are. None of them could have been any nicer, but they all, I think, at that time, the reoccurring theme, looking back to it, is there was a fine line to how friendly they were with you because their business truly depended on them kind of keeping you at arm's length to a degree. And I think that now that things are different, I think to a large degree it has affected the business in a lot of ways.
Have you guys ever met Karrion Kross? Killer Kross, Karrion Kross?
Once.
I right before he went to WWE the first time, I had a conversation with him, and his persona on TV is very scary. He looks especially when he had the bald head and the goatee, he looked very, very scary. And I had a conversation with him maybe like in 2019, and I'm like, this guy's a freaking genius. This guy is so smart. Like he is so like insightful and just has so much to offer. And it kind of killed it for me, to be honest with you. But obviously, that's my own fault. I'm not saying it's his fault in any way, but I'm like, man, like I kind of wish this guy was the killer that I thought he was in and out of the ring. So again, but we're seeing a lot more of that now these days, and
Yeah, it is what it is, I guess, at this point. Chris, you on there with us? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Yeah, no, I can hear you. I wasn't hearing all of it, but I heard a lot of it. It's fascinating stuff.
You just say I didn't hear a lot of it, but I heard a lot of it.
I heard a lot of it.
I think the sound. He's trying to work out the sound.
It's because he's on a phone.
Can you hear me? Okay.
You did right now. I can hear you right now.
Okay, I might not be hearing you, but as long as you guys can hear me. So, talking about, did we go into how the official buyout happened, and we're in a kind of a new era now with the merger with.
Yes,
we talked about that.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no, go in. I would like to hear about what you want to say about it. Go for it.
Well, I think it's interesting that, well, we discussed too, Raw. Now, Raw, from what I understand, did its lowest numbers, correct?
Yeah, it was
It,
just like its second lowest rating ever.
but there's an asterisk. Do you want to know what the asterisk
No, I
is?
understand. I did hear your point, George, too, about, yeah, WWF in '97. A very interesting point made with the product and all that. And NWO had already had that momentum going. Um, were there times? Were there times with that example? Were there times that you could look it back at the, let's say, in the late '80s, in the early '90s, or well, I guess it would be in the mid to late '80s, where let's say, for example, WWF was riding the wave and they were unbeatable at the time. Whereas, was there a time when you would say it was reversed and WCW had a better product, but the WWF was winning ratings, like the Steamboat Flair era or something like that?
Uh, to be fair, I personally wouldn't know because I mean it was TV. There was no like Monday Night War back then. But at the same time, like I think the pro wrestling in general was maybe great because you had Clash of the Champions, the first one, from all accounts, I heard that did a great rating up against WrestleMania
Absolutely.
four. Up against WrestleMania
Yeah.
4, by all accounts. So I think there wasn't. I think it was more maybe like hand in hand. There wasn't one more than the other like it was in the Monday Night Wars. Um, but I mean, 1987 WrestleMania 3, by all accounts, did amazing business, and I heard like the NWA was doing just as great. Just they just weren't doing the big stadiums, but I heard they were just doing just as great with the Great American Bash tours, the War Games, and the Flair on top and the Dusties on top. So by all accounts, I think just business was great from what I hear back then. But it was just hard. It's just hard to measure that compared to the ratings of Raw versus Nitro.
Well, one thing you got to take into account too, and I think where Chris is getting at was, you know, and part of the reason why the WWF might have been more successful than the NWA or WCW is they were on a bigger stage. They were on network TV, where
Yeah.
WCW and NWA, they had their syndication, for their worldwide show, but everything else was basically exclusively on TBS.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
And
Definitely
while
a
the
bigger reach.
WWF was all, syndicated all over, the world, and then you had, NBC backing the
Mhm.
WWE at that time.
I mean, there are a lot of people that were in, that Crockett region or Georgia region that said, I didn't make real money until I went to the WWF. So that kind
Yeah.
of goes to show, like,
But in all
there's
fairness,
kind of like no, go ahead.
too, I know Chris just brought up the whole thing again, mid 97, comparing the WCW product to the, WWF at the time. Believe it or not, the WWF, if you look in the summer of 97, look at, ratings week by week, they slowly were starting to creep up a little bit.
yeah, I mean, they were coming back. I mean, if anything, the house show business and pay-per-view business was better overall. Although Halloween Havoc 97 and Starcade 97, I want to say up to that point were the biggest pay-per-views ever. Better than a WrestleMania or better than any other WWF pay-per-view at the time. But I want to say overall, their house shows and their live events were doing really, really good. A lot better than WCW's, but overall, the ratings was just one thing that Nitro kept crushing Raw on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
It's funny, like George, you mentioned the Nia Jax thing where, okay, is she really not a draw if she's, selling merchandise or whatever? It I'm trying to tie this into like the Al Snow school of thought. Like it's kind of the same with matches, for example. Like the numbers, when you say the numbers can lie sometimes.
Mhm.
And like for example, Al Snow's cool school of thought was, well, Andre and Hogan was the best match at WrestleMania 3, and but everyone says Savage Steamboat, of course. is that a case of the numbers lying in terms of the fans' opinion of what's really better? Like the fans obviously really think Steamboat Savage is better, but the numbers, Andre and Hogan brought the numbers into that live gate and of course the closed circuit pay-per-view.
So it
So
just
it just
depends
depends
on
on
what
what
people
people
define as
define as
match.
match.
That's it. What are people's definition of a word match? To me, match is bell to bell. Not even bell to bell, because I think Warrior Savage, it was beyond the bell to bell that made that match so great. But again, to other people, it might just be box office. But then my question for like an Al Snow or whoever else agrees with Al Snow, when does it stop? Because it's easy to say WrestleMania 3 is the best, or Hogan Andre was the best match. Okay, well, what about WrestleMania 32? What was the best match of WrestleMania 32? And if somebody says, well, by then the WWE was the main reason why they sold out the name WrestleMania. Okay, well, tell me, when did it stop? Tell me between 1987 and 2016 on when that theory of the best match is the one that sold all the tickets. Tell me when that ended. And until somebody tells me, uh, with a good reason, on when that stopped or when was the last time that happened, then I think that argument goes out the window.
In my opinion, I could pinpoint it. I would say the last any sort of mainstream star WWE had was John Cena.
So every WrestleMania, the best match of
No,
was
you know
John
what? You're
Cena.
right. You're wrong. I'm wrong. You know, Brock Lesnar is still a box office attraction.
Okay. So going back, what was the best match of WrestleMania 32? Or did it stop before then?
On some level, I think things kind of cooled off after the buyout of WWF buying WCW.
So 2001. So 2001,
Yeah,
Hogan.
2001, 2002.
So Hogan Rock, I think we can all agree, whether it's box office or not, was the best match of WrestleMania 18, right?
Oh, without question.
Yeah. Like I'm not arguing that. Like whether it's that was the one that everybody paid to see, but it was also the most entertaining one to watch. Like I'm not. There's no argument, right?
No argument.
What about WrestleMania 19? 55,000 people in the crowd. What was the best match?
That was the next year after, right?
Yeah. Was it Kurt versus Brock? Because I know I wanted to watch Jericho versus Shawn more than I wanted to watch the main event.
I'll be honest. That's when everything started blending in together. There wasn't really many pay-per-views. So I'm saying somewhere I'm thinking 01, 02. I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going off what I remember.
So, okay, so based on your memory, so you're saying, let's just say 03, 04. So anything after 03 and 04, we could not pinpoint what the best match was, because then it became more about the product overall than the individual person selling out the show, right?
Absolutely. And then, you start naming off, WrestleMania 32 or WrestleMania 34, you're going to have to refresh my memory with what was on those pay-per-views, because it's starting to come to a point where nothing fully stands out.
It's funny that you say that, because and you mentioned him as well, but looking back in the moment, I think for me, it's always really hard to rank something in the moment. You ask me after any WrestleMania, literally the minute after WrestleMania ends, you ask me like, how does this rank amongst all the WrestleManias? I'm going to tell you the exact same thing every single time. I'm going to say, this is the best WrestleMania I've ever seen in my life. And two, ask me again in a few months, because it's really hard to determine something's legacy when it just happened right now.
Absolutely.
It's so in the moment of watching John Cena, it was really and I was never like a big Cena hater, but like it was really easy to say like, oh man, he should turn heel. Oh man, like he's just out there kissing babies and being corny or whatever. Now that I look back in 2023, I can honestly sit here and tell people with a straight face, if he's not number one, Cena's like definite top 5. Like I cannot emphasize just how beneficial and how amazing of a worker John Cena is when I look back at it. I'm like, man, like he really is like he really was that good. Like I kind of get why he was so popular. With that said, and everything that I'm saying, I'm all tying it back, is that if they didn't have John Cena within 2005 and 2013, I think WWE would have done horrific business. I think they would have done like even when you had John Cena like a couple times he was hurt or he wasn't available to be on the show or whatever, like it just lagged. It was just like it, yeah, there was something definite missing about John Cena not being there uh during those times. With that said, I'm going back to the Al Snow. John Cena was clearly the biggest superstar in all of pro wrestling between '05 and like 2015. So, with that said, does John Cena have the best match of every WrestleMania that he's been in?
If he's the one putting the butts in the seats, then yeah, he
So,
is.
well, no. I'm asking you personally. That's what you personally feel. Screw Al Snow and
Well,
his thinking. What does Eric
no,
Malikian
no,
think?
no, no. And what Al Snow's trying to
I'm
get
not talking
to,
about
and
Al
I
Snow.
feel
I'm talking about
no, no,
Eric
no, no.
Malikian is trying to get.
No. But I'm tying in because I've talked to Al Snow before, and if you listen to Al Snow break everything down, just not on a podcast, just not in a shoot interview. The end of the day, when you break down everything he says and look back at everything back in the day, what attracted a young Eric Malikian to pro wrestling, to buying merchandise, going to the LA Sports Arena for house shows, getting pay-per-views? It was Hulk Hogan. So if we're viewing that, John Cena was having the best matches because he was the one attracting the women and the children to coming to shows, buying pay-per-views, buying merchandise. So yes, he is the attraction. He's the one why the majority of people are there.
So WrestleMania 25, Undertaker Shawn Michaels was not a better match than John Cena against Edge against Big Show.
I mean, did it draw money? Did it? I mean, that's the thing.
I don't know. You tell me. So WrestleMania 26. No, I'm sorry. WrestleMania
But
27.
in all fairness, Undertaker's a pretty big name, so I'm sure him just being on the card equated to
But
a
I
lot
mean,
of people
so
there.
Yeah, and
so
also and
with,
also
with
you didn't have Hulk Hogan back in the day. You didn't have a competing main event with the star like the Undertaker,
yeah.
like basically on his even playing field. You know what I mean? So it's a
Hmm.
different era, different time. To go back to your question real quick about when did WrestleMania just sell tickets on its own? I mean, to me, back in the day, they were doing great numbers with the Silver Dome, and then arguably WrestleMania 4 and 5 were wasted attendance WrestleManias because they were still hot. WrestleMania 6, they were in the Sky Dome. They could have gone to stadiums for 4 and 5. I've heard
Oh,
people argue.
I just real quick, and I apologize. Can you reiterate that in 5 minutes? Because I always had a thought process behind that that I think you'd agree with.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, going back to that, it's like I remember hearing like back in '91 when people look back at WrestleMania 7, it's like, oh, if they could only have just done that at WrestleMania 4, maybe it could have sold
Mhm.
out type thing. But okay, so then obviously, with the Hoosier Dome at WrestleMania 8, it was a stretch. They were kind of at the end of that era and they barely kind of papered that place to look decent. Um, then of course they had to go back to arenas, right? Arena sized places. You could argue that WrestleMania 17, let's forget that it was a great WrestleMania, the matches were awesome, but I think that was the time when it was now okay, the brand WWE, the brand WrestleMania is now we can do a stadium where the matches don't really matter anymore. I think you can kind of gauge it off of that. Um, and then, it's really the run of the company at that point. Like, for example, they just announced WrestleMania 40, right? The tickets go
Mhm.
on sale.
Mhm.
Well, if you look at the prices of those tickets, it's unbelievable, right? The
Mhm.
ring sides are 10 grand and all that. Um, we don't have any matches announced. So So it's genius on the part of the company to make the WWE logo or even the brand WrestleMania aside from WWE is a brand in itself within that company. And that's the marketing genius of where you want your fans perspective on things to come from is the perspective of, oh, the star is the company logo. The star is the WrestleMania logo. And I think once that's achieved from a business standpoint, then you have the company where you want it, where you want to have it in order to sell merchandise, sell tickets. And I think that was the turning point of the stars and the matches not really mattering as much. And you could say that's unfortunate, or you could say because again, when WrestleMania 1 and all that came around, they had to create these stars in order to make that company the star.
So you're saying around 2001, 2002?
I guess what well, yeah, I mean arguably you could say 15 or 16 could have been in the stadium and maybe they could have, but but I think at that point we even though they were in arenas, I think at that point once the WWF kind of took off, then that's where like Vince basically wanted it. I want this company to be the star. And I think once they transitioned into that era of we can fill stadiums now, I think that's your the pinpointed time really of when it switched into that. And so maybe now we don't have like you were saying, Eric, how I can't really remember the matches with this WrestleMania, that WrestleMania, and I agree with you. But I think that in large part that's because the focus, at least subconsciously, isn't on those people, those matches, those stars, because we're so engulfed by, it's WrestleMania. That's great for business, but it does change the people's perceptions, in my opinion.
Chris, what was the best? Real quick, what was the best match of WrestleMania 8? Quick.
Oh, I'd say Piper. I mean, Hogan, Flair.
I said quick, so I said quick. So the fact that you have to think about it, and Piper Brett was your first thought.
Yeah.
Over Hogan Sid, you're gonna tell me that Sid isn't a better match than Piper and Brett?
I got it, but no, Hogan Sid. I don't think. Well, remember that pay-per-view was sold as a double main event.
Okay, then Savage and Flair.
There you go. Yeah, but that one made sense.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, what got me to watch that pay-per-view is different than, like you said, it's hard to see things in the moment, but in retrospect, that was the match I enjoyed. But what got me watching that pay-per-view? What got all of us watching it at the time?
I think it just goes back to what's somebody's definition of a match, right? Because I think of it as a match as independent of what drew. Who's the biggest star, who's the biggest draw, that's great, but that's different to me than my definition of who's got the best match. I mean, the best match can be something from the undercard. The best match can be, Brett and Owen was by far the best match of. I go back and forth with Brett and Owen and Razor and Shawn at WrestleMania 10. But Yokozuna, the actual champion, was in 2 matches. Does that mean he was in the 2 best matches of the card? Not, I'm not going to put Lex Luger and Yoko over Brett and Owen.
Right.
But going back to 4 and 5, do you think starting from Mania 3 that the plan was to be in a stadium every single year for the rest of time, but 4 and 5 they got a ridiculous amount of money from Trump for those manias, right?
Yes, they did.
Yeah,
so it's kind of like, you would like to think that initially when 3 happened, cool, we're going to have 4 in a stadium, we're going to have 5 in a stadium, because 6 was in a stadium, 7 was supposed to be in a stadium, 8 was in a stadium. So I like to think that now that we see Mania in a stadium every single year since 23, I feel like maybe that was always the plan, even going back to WrestleMania 3, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, and you the proof is in the pudding there as far as Trump and the money in Trump Plaza, Atlantic City Casino, because I mean, why would they go 2 years in a row? And we've never seen that since.
Yeah. I agree.
You know, and I bet you, and I
Yes, I know you're on mute right now, but
I can almost guarantee you that Trump proposed to do a third year in a row because he was at if you remember he was at WrestleMania 6 and 7.
Yes, he was.
I don't remember.
Yeah, he was at 6 too.
I feel like with 4 and 5, I feel like the lump money that was being offered was so big, and I'm talking like before Mania 4. You don't decide these things just the day before, the day of. I want to say before Mania 4, when the deal was thrown together, I feel like it was here. We're gonna give you this this huge sum of money to have Mania, but it's got to be for 2 years. You can't just have one. And they're like, oh man, but we don't want to be there 2 years in a row. We just want to do one. Oh, either take it or leave it. Either there's this big lump of money, sum of money, but it's got to be 2 straight years. And I feel like that was like just they didn't. And again, I'm just guessing here. I feel like they didn't want to do it by WWE, but the offer was just too good to pass up.
I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, when was it agreed upon that 4 and 5 were going to be at the same location? That's a very I've never heard an answer to that. Do you imagine all the comps they got, all the markers they got at the tables? Like, I'm sure a lot of the boys were like, "Come on, let's come back. Let's do this again." You know?
Because did they? You would know. Did they announce Trump Plaza at 4 for the following year?
The only time they ever did that, the first time they did that was, of course, because they had to sell a gargantuan amount of tickets, was between 6 and 7. But at least publicly, they did not announce it.
So when do you remember they announced Trump Plaza for 5?
Oh, not till later. You know,
Okay.
like normal, like around Royal Rumble time or yeah, you know But again, remember, this was not at a time when they had to remember when they were at WrestleMania 9, Caesars. That was not a big place. I was there, and it was a sellout with 16,000 people, same size as a sports arena. So, but they were struggling. That was a struggle to sell that place out. And from my account, when I was there, they were still selling tickets the day of. They were almost very within 100 people of a sellout. But so I mean, they didn't have to do that back then. We don't need to announce this. It's going to sell out like that, you know.
Yep.
A different time, and talk about a transition from casino to casino, Atlantic City Trump Plaza to Caesar's Palace Las Vegas. I mean, obviously Vince wanted to go to 10 for 1, 10, and 20 to the Garden, but and it was perfect timing, actually, if you think about it, for 10 and 20, because it looked good. It was the Garden, but those were both times where they were struggling. You know, during 20, the Attitude Era was done. During 10, the 80s Hogan era was done. So it was kind of perfect timing. And boy, what happened to that tradition of 30 being there, 40 being there?
Yeah, you know why they
I
can
thought
do
that
it.
was a tradition, you know.
You know why they can do it.
Of course.
What was I gonna say? What do you think the best match of WrestleMania 9 was?
Probably the well, I mean, you know what? I enjoyed it was cut short, but Brett and Yoko was not bad at all. I think
so too.
Huh?
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I think it was better than most people thought it was.
Guys think too, were you surprised at the ending of number 10, the way Brett, Yoko fell off the ropes and all that? Were you surprised that happened? Like, I was almost obviously when Luger lost, okay, Brett's getting the title. But he didn't do the sharpshooter. Like, we saw him. He got it in at Caesars at 9. We saw him get the sharpshooter. I mean, maybe if you want to go away from the Al Snow school of thought, maybe I'll give it to the Head Shrinkers and the Steiners. But
really,
but
no love for Tatanka versus Shawn Michaels.
No, it was just anticlimactic with the count out.
I think Sean was completely overrated at that time.
Yeah, I do too. I don't think he was in great shape.
I think
And,
Tatanka carried that match just as much.
Right, but I think the booking was what put that match down on the rung. But maybe that's the third match. I mean, the most anticipated match that I thought was going to be good was the was
Mega
Luger
Maniacs.
Luger Perfect. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
No,
Luger
seriously,
Perfect.
I wanted to see the Mega Maniacs. I thought they were legit going to win the Tag Team Championships.
I did too. The way they were building it up.
Well, now let me ask you this: if Hogan didn't come in and do the whole "I'm going to get the world title," would the Mega Maniacs have won the titles?
Maybe. I think so. That's a good. Yeah.
And do you guys know before Hogan's announcement to come back and going in for the tag titles, who was the team that was supposed to go against Mega Maniacs?
Wasn't it the Nasty Boys?
It was the Nasty Boys, yeah. Would they have won the titles? That would be interesting. I think they would have. They had to have one title switch if Brett was going to, keep his belt.
Well, I think the Nasty Boys were on their way out after WrestleMania 9.
Yeah, they were. I don't know if that was yet like an official thing, because I remember leading into WrestleMania 9 being at those Long Beach tapings and all that. They were really pushing them. Like, they were like, this is the face tag team now, like there was no indication, at least in March when that aired, that they were. I don't know when that was announced, when it was official backstage that they were going. I don't know.
Well, then remember, too, you had the Steiner brothers who just came in around that time.
That's true.
Steiner's came around the Rumble, right?
Yeah.
Against the
Yes, I
Beverly
think
Brothers.
just before.
It was the battle of the brothers, Beverly and Steiner.
Which, by the way, what do you think is the best worked brothers team? What would be the dream match? Shoot Brothers versus Work Brothers.
That's a good question.
Can I tell you mine?
You go for it.
But you guys can't use it, so you guys got to pick different teams.
Oh,
The Steiner brothers versus the Dudleys in their prime.
what about the Hardys?
What about them?
They got to be in there.
Yeah. So
What's your
dream match? What's your work shoot match? Work Brothers versus Shoot Brothers.
I mean, if you're talking Work Brothers, you got to go Kevin and Lance Von Erich. I'm just kidding.
I'm going to go with the Anderson brothers versus the Steiner brothers.
No, I said you can't use the Steiners. I already said the Steiners.
Oh.
You got to pick a new brother. Wait, are you talking about Arn and Ole or Gene and Ole?
Arn and Ole.
Okay.
I never saw Gene and Ole, so
You know
I
what
can't
team
comment
I
on
was,
that.
you know what team I was surprised at were Work Brothers? The Smoking Guns.
Oh yeah.
Let's go with they're not related. No way.
Well, now, if it's Work Brothers, was the Mega Maniacs in there? Because Brother Brudai, they're brothers.
No.
Okay.
Those are Hogan brothers. So that's a whole different topic.
That's a different. It's a whole different brother topic.
That should be the next Mount Rushmore on Bantos Locos. Who are the top Mount Rushmore of Work Brothers?
Yeah. Work only brothers.
And disqualified. Just so I can make it difficult for you guys. No brothers-in-laws. So Hart Foundation and the Bulldogs are disqualified.
No father, son, Dusty and Dustin.
No, those are brothers.
All right, that's a good question. Thinking caps. Yeah, I'm gonna give me a second. But
well, if Mark Guido Mancini was here, he would say the Beverly Brothers would be involved in there somewhere.
That's a Work brother team.
Yeah.
And the Bushwhackers can't do it. They're cousins.
They're cousins, yeah. But I think they're legit cousins, right? They're shoot cousins, right?
Yeah, I think they are. Yeah.
Well, guys, we're running pretty low on time here. Is there anything else anyone else wants to get in before we wrap up completely?
Yeah, I wanted to know your shoot versus Rourke Brothers dream match.
How about we leave the cliffhanger like the 80s 90s sitcoms. To be continued. And you had to watch the next week.
No love for the Hardys or Harlem Heat.
Hey, that's to be continued. Wait a minute.
No love for Edge and Christian.
To be continued. ... just came on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been great, guys. This has been fascinating.
Yes.
Of all that I heard, and we apologize to the fans if you experienced our technical difficulties. Hopefully, it was just us experiencing that. George Hermoza, Eric Malikian, any final parting thoughts or comments?
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Klaus. And also, before we wrap up, I'd like to give both of you plugs. If anything you want to plug, your social media, anything else you have going on, please feel free to do so right now. Go ahead, George.
You can follow me on G Hermoza, GHERMOZA, the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel. Got some great videos on there. www.youtube.com/the Wrestling Chatter. Click on to subscribe. The more content you see, I forgot how to say it. The more subscribers we get, the more content we can provide you. Is that right? Can't remember.
That's right. And I'll double that. YouTube.com/the Wrestling Chatter. Check out all our archived Extreme Memories. Cali's Finest are up there. One of these days, George, we're going to get that going again. Speaking of to be continued. Every Friday I'm in Chatsworth. Right there at the Call the Action ringside, 19801 Nordop Place, Chatsworth. Bell time 7:30 p.m. Come on down, check out live wrestling every single week. Hit me up on Facebook, Chris Claus, KRIS KLOSS on Facebook. If you are involved in benefit, charity, nonprofits, and you need an auctioneer to raise some donations, raise some charity, and raise some much needed funds, hit me up on Facebook, and I will get back to you, and I'll send you some videos, and work with all sorts of nonprofits and celebrities as well that want to do good. So hit me up on Facebook, Chris Claus, right there. I'll get back to you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next time right here on the Wrestling with Reality podcast.